So I'm Nirit. Thank you for being here with me. Um, I came to this topic a little bit late in the game. I think as someone who grew through the ranks of technology companies, I wasn't aware of the fact that I was a woman. Does that make any sense? Um, I have spent a vast majority of my career pretending to be a man. And I don't do it very well, as it turns out. But in the last few years, I've discovered that I've been going through the motions in a man's world. But there's a very specific reason why this is gender and profitability, because people used to talk about women in the workplace, and I don't think that that's productive. I think one of the things that I've discovered over the years is that we have things to learn from one another. This wasn't about, it's not a woman's thing and it's not a man's thing, and the fact that we have men in the room also helps. I've been to many, many panels where the whole panel is men, the whole audience is women, and something is kind of funny with this because nothing's going to change unless we're working together to make that happen, and unless we realize that we each have something to give that's unique. So let's talk a little bit about gender diversity. And again, we're talking about gender diversity not because we're being politically correct, but because we really have something different to offer. You can look at the numbers, and the numbers will tell you a little bit about each kind of diversity and why diversity matters. It shows up very clearly in all of the many studies that are being done now. We can move ahead. So, these are some of the things that we measure when we look at the performance in the boardroom, in management teams. And it's actually quite interesting if you follow this continuum. What we learn about what each of us does a little better than the other and what we can actually learn from one another. Now, I mentioned to you that I come from the high-tech industry. I spent most of my life launching companies, building companies, and helping high-growth companies to go to market and to grow, and also big companies to spread out into new markets. All of that has to do with learning diverse audiences and how to communicate better with one another. So a lot of this centers around communication, and I think that for most of my career, I felt like having some compassion would be a weakness. And what we're learning in all of these studies, as you'll begin to see here, is that leading with compassion is now very much appreciated. They start to talk not only about IQ, but about EQ, and being in touch with men, with our masculine and feminine sides. So there we are. I said EQ. So social skills are now really being understood in the workplace. We are looking at the behaviors of managers. And when they look at the 5 primary areas that they're measuring, in 4 of them, women tend to perform better. Where we don't perform as well, interestingly enough, is emotional stability. We worry. We need to learn from our male counterparts sometimes to leave work at work. I mean, does anybody have that problem? I know that I go home and it's all on me. And most of us are not psychologists, and we're not brain surgeons, and it would probably be okay to leave our work at work. So we need to learn from one another. Very interesting to see that men and women have equal levels of ambition, but men. Have you ever seen how men apply for jobs? Seen men answer for a job application. Woman gets a job application. It says, here are the 10 points. Oh, yes, 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 yes. No, I won't apply. A man goes, no, 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 yes, go for it. So again, not better or worse, just different. This comes from my world, and this is also very indicative, right? So if you look at the kinds of investments that's put behind women-owned businesses, VC firms in particular. Some of you know that I'm about to launch my first fund in Portugal. I'm a Portuguese-Israeli-American, which already is very confusing, and I probably should get therapy. But my expertise today is having spent many years in tech and many years trying to use my knowledge of the management world in a nonprofit setting and driving purpose-driven businesses is mostly now in the impact space. So how do we put money behind things that both make the world better and also are profitable. And what I'm working on now is primarily in the sustainability and health and medical space. So I encounter a lot of these kinds of behaviors. And the interesting thing is that the growth rate of women entrepreneurs is higher, but we're still way behind what men are doing. And we could be doing a lot better, clearly. But tech is a very good place for women to be doing this. As soon you'll see how that looks in various places in the world, because the performance is quite different from one place to the next. Okay, so this is something that's probably self-explanatory, but there's a very strong business case for women as leaders. In the performance numbers are pretty clear on this in terms of revenues and profit margins. Also on the boards. Anybody here serving on boards? How many women in the boardroom with you? One. How many women on the board with you, Tali? Okay. Okay, but you know that, but it's interesting because the opposite's becoming true, right? I'm very active in an organization called YPO, and YPO has a women's business network. And last year, they started to appoint men on the board of the Women's Business Network, and I thought, go away. But you know what? They have really something to bring to the table because they're making this a part of the agenda so that we're not as siloed. I dream of a time where I don't need a women's business network because I'd like to see women in all the verticals and not focusing on isolating themselves. So that's the goal. Okay, so this kind of interesting because then you can start to see things here as they relate to your region, wherever you're coming from. I think most people are Latin in this room. You know, my eyes, of course, gravitate to the last bullet because I come from the Israeli ecosystem, so I'm always very proud that Israel is rated the best place for women entrepreneurs. I kind of like being there. But Latin America, of course, is a little bit behind here. We're 2.8% women-owned businesses. Surprisingly enough, there are more women founders in Vietnam than in North America, and I think the best number was in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. The highest rate of women in senior management. But a lot of interesting things happening in Africa today. So it really pays to follow how these numbers are changing and how we're helping each other, because it's a reflection of us working better together, right? You're a good clicker. That's a good job. So I think it pays not only to talk about gender diversity, as we said before, but diversity at large. We would really be missing an opportunity if we didn't actually address diversity at large. Because what we're learning is that when people come into a boardroom or a corner office, if you're lucky enough to have one of those, most of us work in open space or by remote today, we find that a diversity in perspective is something that we ought not be afraid of. It was a time where you couldn't speak up and be different, right? So we're living in incredible times where differences are celebrated, and those numbers are reflected much higher and much better. And beyond that, if you want the best talent, and we're going to see that in a minute, it's expected. Young people today are taking us to task. On one hand, they're a lot more spoiled, and on the other, they're really very, very demanding in terms of where they want to work. So you see that revenues go up 19%. The profits are much, much higher. And gender diverse and diversity in general will take us to more than 20% better. So we talked a little bit about each of these. Talent is a big piece of it. We are in many industries now where it's really hard to get good employees, particularly post-COVID. Anybody been in Amsterdam airport recently? Did they lose your luggage? So people were let go over COVID, and now it's very hard to get them back. But we're really at a war for talent everywhere we go. I know in Portugal we have a problem with that very much, because for every job there's a huge amount of competition to get the best people, and many of them end up leaving. So customer orientation and understanding your customer, but also enhancing the image, because today the companies that are most respected are the ones that are actually paying attention to these things. There's a lot of research going on that never happened before. And it allows us to make better decisions. So just something to consider as you start to look at your own diversity. Is anybody responsible for diversity in their workplace? Anybody? Do you measure? You measure your results in diversity? Are you able to look at key performance, KPIs? I think that's a really big challenge, and if you're able to do it, it's terrific, because being able to quantify these things is just as important, if not more important, than many other things. Being able to track progress and measure if we're doing well, and having those baselines to compare where we came from and also where we're going, right? So I purposely wanted to get through, I took a bunch of slides out, because what I really want to do with the remaining time is to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in your offices. Not so much to address questions, because I think discussion is much more meaningful than me coming up here and spouting a bunch of numbers at you. I would encourage you to read the statistics and to read some of the studies, because they're fascinating. But what have been your experiences, good and bad? And how do they relate, one to the vertical and another to the geography that you're in? Are you seeing anything changing in your workplaces, in your regions, in your countries, as it relates to gender diversity or diversity at large? Please.
Yeah, look, so I'm based in Mexico City. And you can definitely see that at the entry level, the mid-level positions, but it's still lacking at the senior level positions. And after reflecting on this, and I get asked all the time about, what do you think needs to happen? And I'd love to hear your comments on this, but I really feel that men who are in the position of privilege, and what I mean by this, white, heterosexual men, need to take a lot more leadership in this space, because I see so many women working multiple jobs and being responsible or seen as being responsible for diversity. And when there's not a woman on a panel and there's not a woman, who do we think of? We go to another woman, but we need to get men to be engaged a lot more. And I'm not sure really how to do that, because most of them don't see it as their job. It's always handed off to some woman in the team to be a diversity champion.
We see that a lot in America, I think. You end up getting the token sort of diverse person of color, happens to be a woman who's responsible for diversity. I mean, let me pose a question to the men in this room, since you're very brave. What brings you to a conversation like this? Okay, you get to be around a lot of women. No, but honestly, what is it that brings you to a room like this, and why is this part of your agenda? Thank you. You want to get the best people, and you don't care where they're coming from. Anybody else? You're from El Salvador? Is that a common theme? No. You going to run for office? We need politicians like you, probably. So, have some of you implemented some interesting tactics that you'd like to share that maybe have been particularly effective or ineffective? Anybody here working hard on that and have some key performances to share? Any struggles? Any particular struggles you want to share with us, and maybe some of us can help you to solve that problem? Where did he go? Ah, there we go.
Yes, I'm working with women, but in the countryside. My whole project is towards women and empowerment women. Those KPIs, the measurements that I've done,
KPIs. Yeah.
KPIs, yeah, thank you. They're actually because the husbands have migrated to better jobs, but they don't send the money back home, so the mothers have to see how get food on the table, and they are more efficient workers in the field than the man. So I've developed all this project for them, but the thing is that it's a bit difficult for them, for the girls, for the women, to get organized. So I've done the part of organizing them, where they can take care of a crop, but they'll have like some income because of taking care of that crop. So it's an extra motive or incentive.
Are you doing any microfinance? Where are you from?
Guatemala, but I work on the countryside at Las Verapaces.
Right, okay. I think in agricultural communities, it's been very interesting to see how women in the workforce have transformed themselves. In Israel, it's been kind of interesting because we're also looking at minorities and how we integrate them so that they can become a much stronger force and a much more equal force in society. Is anybody else having that problem? And some of that is being solved with microfinancing. Taking the skills that people have done very well at home and learning how to monetize those. So it's less gender diversity in the workplace and rather creating new markets that maybe didn't exist before that allow women to participate more in the economic success of society.
Yeah, microfinancing here is like at a very, very slow pace. So
Yeah.
that's why it's difficult because they still have to do all the paperwork. It's not that easy for them.
What percentage of the do you think of management in Guatemala is actually inclusive of women? Do you see the diversity here in the CEO's offices? Not so much. 10%. Yeah, so that's what it was. I thought she was shooing me that I needed to finish. I think it's fascinating. I think these kinds of communities are going to change that. Anybody else want to share from your own experiences and maybe something that we can learn? I love looking at case studies because the interaction here, if we can teach each other, we're in much better shape.
Hi, I come from Colombia and I work in a startup, an education startup. And in my team, in our company, we are mainly women. But it's so hard to have like leadership roles around men. I see it like even here all the time, and we're like educated and people with opportunities. But if you, maybe because I'm like very conscious about it, but if you go to a conversation, even with people who want to invest, they always look at the men to talk to. And I think it's hard for women, even if we are already there, like in leadership roles, to keep ourselves like up and believe in ourselves when we see like around. And I don't think it's something really conscious, but I think it's something they, like men already have that's difficult to change. But it has to do like with very like strong and like feelings or learnings that come from very in you, right? Like family, maybe genes, I don't know, like many things that are difficult
Societal
to change.
constructs.
Yeah.
They also hand them the bill, right? You know, I think, I don't know whether men are aware of this, but when we come into an office, we have a conscious decision. We can either be the good mother or the ice queen, right? And we have to make a choice. I think for the last few years, is anybody else struggling with that? I'm spending a lot of my time trying to bring the two personas together because I'm very different at home than I am at work. So people who know me at home think I'm squishy, right? When I go to work, I'm the ice queen. I'm a lot more of a man. And I think men, you know, our challenge to you is you need to do the same. Because these studies are saying that behaving like a woman a little bit will help you to be more successful and to have compassion in the way that you lead. because loving others means they're going to love you back, as it turns out. So we need to allow ourselves to do those things. So I hope that you'll go home and take some of this with you and start to move society in the various places that you're living in. I'm certainly trying to do that in Portugal. Thank you very much for being here with me, and what a delightful time at Volcano. Thanks, everyone.